Introduction to emotional reactivity. If you can follow just one rule, you could cut your emotional reactivity in half. This isn't about willpower. It's not about forcing yourself to just calm down or doing something that requires enormous effort. Instead, it's about being radically honest with yourself. Think of emotions as the match, the initial spark. Habits, routines, and self-care are the wood that keeps a fire going. But how you think, that's the gasoline. Certain types of thinking can take a small flame and turn it into an uncontrollable wildfire. One of the biggest culprits is something we all do without realizing it: black and white thinking. How to identify black and white thinking? Black and white thinking is when we take a situation and strip away all the nuance. Instead of seeing shades of gray, we see only two extremes: success or failure, good or bad, all or nothing. You can spot it through words like always, never, perfect, terrible, everything, nothing, worst, best. These words exaggerate reality. They make things feel far worse than they actually are. Examples. A spouse says, "You never listen to me. I always have to repeat myself." A student says, "I failed this test. I'll never be good at school. Everything is pointless." An employee says, "My boss is the worst communicator. Nothing is ever clear here." A parent says, "I'm a terrible mom. Other people have it all together, but I don't." Notice what's happening here. Each situation is difficult, but the language escalates it into something hopeless. The result? Stronger emotions, deeper frustration, and a sense of helplessness. Black and white thinking fuels anxiety, depression, and anger. Worse, it shuts down problem solving. Why black and white thinking feels good at first. If it's so destructive, why do we keep doing it? Because in the short term, it serves a purpose. It gives us a sense of certainty and even self-justification. If your spouse sometimes forgets chores, saying they never help makes you feel like the responsible one. If your boss is unclear sometimes, calling them terrible lets you avoid the hard work of communicating your needs. If a subject is hard, saying "I'll never get it" saves you from the discomfort of trying and possibly failing. In other words, black and white thinking excuses us from action. It lets us feel powerless, which oddly protects us from guilt, disappointment, and accountability. It can even feel validating. Think about how comforting it is to call up a friend and say, "I've had the worst day in the world." They respond, "Oh, you poor thing," and in that moment, the drama feels soothing. Sometimes we don't even make the call. We just have that internal dialogue. The brain likes shortcuts. Black and white thinking is a shortcut to avoid uncertainty. It's easier to label the entire world as bad than to wrestle with messy complexity. Where it comes from: survival mode. This habit isn't random, it's wired into us. Thousands of years ago, our ancestors needed to make quick decisions in dangerous situations. If another tribe was attacking, your brain didn't have the luxury of nuance. Seeing the enemy as bad made it easier to fight back. Black and white thinking simplified choices in life or death scenarios. But here's the problem: most of our daily challenges today aren't life-threatening, yet our brains still default to this survival wiring. Instead of helping us survive, it now fuels stress, conflict, and emotional instability. How to be less emotionally reactive. 1. Practice radical honesty. The first step is to admit it. Black and white thinking is a lie. It's a mental trick we use to excuse ourselves or to avoid effort. When you catch yourself exaggerating, pause and call it out. "That's not true. I'm making it extreme." 2. Spot your trigger words. Create a list of the words you use when you exaggerate, like always, never, nobody, everything, hopeless. Keep them visible. Every time one pops into your head, see it as a red flag. 3. Name your emotion. Feelings are valid. Thoughts are not always accurate. Instead of saying, "I feel like you always ignore me," which is a thought, try, "I feel hurt." Stick to "I feel emotion." Simple, honest, grounded. 4. Reframe in the gray. Train yourself to use both and. Life is rarely either or. My boss didn't communicate well, and he also wants the team to succeed. I made a mistake, and I'm still a capable, intelligent person. I feel devastated about losing my mom, and I feel relief that her suffering has ended. Holding two truths at once builds resilience. 5. Look for exceptions. If you think, "My spouse never helps around the house," force yourself to remember one time they did, even if it was small. Exceptions break the illusion of never. 6. Be specific. Instead of, my boss is terrible, say, my boss didn't explain the deadline clearly for this project. That level of detail turns a vague frustration into a solvable problem. 7. Check your accountability. Could I have asked for clarity? Did I communicate my needs? Am I overwhelmed because I'm taking on too much at once? Owning your part doesn't mean blaming yourself. It means regaining control. Everyday applications of gray thinking. Let's make this real. At work, instead of, this place is the worst, reframe to, this job is stressful and I've learned a lot here too. In relationships, instead of, my partner never supports me, reframe to, sometimes they miss signals and other times they show up for me in meaningful ways. With yourself, instead of, I'm a complete failure, reframe to, I didn't do well this time and I can still improve next time. This shift may sound small, but over time it lowers stress, improves problem solving, and builds stronger connections with others. Summary of how to reduce emotional reactivity. Black and white thinking makes us emotionally reactive because it exaggerates reality, fuels helplessness, and shuts down solutions. When you learn to spot exaggerations, reframe them in the gray, and hold space for multiple truths, you take back control. You become less reactive, calmer, and more effective. Changing old thought patterns is not easy. It takes awareness and practice, but the payoff is huge. You can change your brain. You can shift your mood. You can live with more balance, less stress, and more peace. So remember, notice the extremes. Name your real feelings. Reframe in the gray. Look for exceptions. Be specific and accountable. Do this consistently, and over time, your emotional reactivity will shrink and your sense of freedom will grow. Thank you for watching, and take care.